Hey, hello everybody. We're here from the Melrose Tree Project, and we are talking about the beech leaf disease. But first, I want to just do a quick note. What is the Melrose Tree Project anyhow? Well, you may have heard of us from the spring, where we ran the biggest tree hunt. And you can see these kiddos in the top right corner have discovered, of all things, an amazingly large beech tree. So that was one of the winning trees. We divided it up by age groups, and we had the mayor out at the common, and we presented a set of awards. It was a grand time, and it really helped us basically fulfill a key part of our mission, which is how do we actually raise awareness of the tree stock that's in Melrose, and then how do we also advocate in the advocacy for our tree stock is really part of what brought us to the beech leaf disease theme and concept. So we've been running the beech leaf disease inventory. So we've been inventorying beech trees throughout the summer, and I'm going to show you the results of what that inventory looks like. We're running a tree exploration. So this is mostly for kids, for students, and we're going to be assembling down at the corner of the Lynn Fellsway and Bellevue. We're going to do some leaf rubbings. We're going to do tree identification. We're going to be measuring heights of trees, diameters of trees, really getting to understand our trees. And then we'll take a walk up Bellevue, review some of the other trees that are in the inventory. Just again, to raise awareness, have fun, be outdoors. We've had some really good connections with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts in the local area. Turns out that this work actually helps them fulfill requirements for their first class badge in Boy Scouts and also for the forestry merit badge. So I think it's a double win, right? Outdoor community and help these kids achieve and grow. And then the final thing is the Lewis Monk Tree Memorial. And if some of you have been here in Melrose for a while, you'll remember at the corner of the Lynn Fellsway and Tremont Street, right there on the southeast corner, there's a set of tennis courts. And at that tennis court, there was a very large tree limb that fell down and crushed the fence on the court. Now that limb was 36 inches in diameter, and the tree was 7 feet in diameter. And if you go by now, you see grass. You see nothing. And it's because the tree was cut down, and then the stump was ground down, and it vanished, and there's nothing left anymore. So we partnered with J. Bradley Architects, and J. Bradley Architects basically came up with this tree memorial design. And the idea is, even though the tree died, we want to remember that these amazing trees were once here, that were hundreds of years old. And so the memorial basically has a sitting area. It has the simulation of an arbor, of the overall canopy. It has this red area, and then there's the sample of the tree, of that actual limb, the cookie, which is a cross section, would be embedded in this. So you get the piece, you get shade, you can contemplate, and you can also think about the trees that once were here. So we think it's just a great idea, and I don't think we've seen anything like this for sure in New England. So this is then one of the ideas and the projects we're working on. We're always welcome to have volunteers, and we'll talk about that in a little bit of how to sign up and participate. You can just go to melrosetreeproject.org if you want to contact us. There's contact information there. But let's get into the core topic, which is the beech leaf disease in Melrose. So let's take a look at what we've discovered over the course of this summer. Well, some of our some of our trees are absolutely healthy, and everybody probably recognizes this. It's Bellevue. It's a set of twin beeches on either side of this house. And what we know is when these trees are alive and vibrant, that they're providing cooling, shading. Studies have shown that the temperatures can be anywhere between 5 to 25 degrees cooler underneath the dense canopy than it is over an adjacent asphalt. So this is wonderful. I mean, this helps lower our air conditioning bills. I've talked to residents as we've gone around Melrose that now all of a sudden have the side of their house exposed to sunlight after a tree has been cut down. And it's like, wow, my house is actually a lot hotter than it used to be. And I've just been so glad to get to know folks. Yeah. So we know that it provides cooling, but let's find out what else we discovered. This is, James having done a survey and creating this kind of a scorecard. So what we know is that some trees have been cut down, that some trees are in this range that have had their canopy affected. There are some that are affected with full canopy, and then there's some that are not affected. So not affected, no sign in the leaves or in the bark, and a full canopy to James with a visual eye, to us novice. And we're going to hear from Boston Tree Preservation because they have much better ways to identify this than you or I do walking around, right? But the net is that only 56% of the beeches in Melrose you would call healthy. So let's look at what not healthy actually looks like. What have we discovered? Well, we've discovered the classic signs of the zebraing between the veins in beech leaves. If you see this, then absolutely for sure you have something to talk up to Boston Tree Preservation about. This green leaf right here, nice and glossy, and also notice how it's smooth, which is in stark contrast to this leaf here. And we have actually seen a lot of where the leaves are starting to pucker. Now, there's multiple reasons. Leave it to the Boston Tree Preservation folks to help us diagnose what is it that actually is behind this, because there's multiple causes. But this on the right is definitely beech leaf disease. And we need to be worried about this. And Boston Tree Preservation will tell us why we need to be worried about this, because if it's not remediated, there can be problems. What else have we seen? We've seen, I just had to get focus. We've also seen effect on the bark. So when that tree is not healthy in the canopy, it leaves itself vulnerable, okay? And that vulnerability can happen right here. This is the beech tree that sits over at the Beebe estate. And this is another beech tree that was shot, and this is going up into the trunk. But you can see the damage and the challenges that this has, and this is affecting the supply of sugars going up and down through this trunk. So definitely there are problems going on with some of these trees as you look at it from the trunk and the bark. If we go forward and we look at some of our trees, this is over on Lake Avenue. There's a couple more trees in here. And you can definitely see that we're losing leaves in the canopies, right? This is out in the back over on Clifford. This is a fair amount of leaf loss. If you look in the back, there's actually a back section to this tree that still has a decent canopy. It's the front section that's facing us that has all this leaf loss. And then here you see another beech tree, and up here there's definitely leaf loss. So these are all challenges. And the good news is I was talking to some folks over on Crystal, and there actually is a help, and there's actually some ways to actually tackle this. And so I'd like to turn it over to Dawn, and I'll stop presenting. I'm going to stop talking, because what we really want to do is we want to preserve the trees instead of having the tree get to what you're seeing here. And this is a cut beech. Ideally, we don't have cut beeches. Ideally, we have trees that actually are alive and providing that wonderful cooling. So, Dawn, are you okay to take it away?
I think so.
All right, I'm stop presenting, and then you can control your tempo and control your mouse.
Great. Let me see here. I think if I get this right. And
there you go. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so everybody, thanks for having us tonight, and James, thank you for putting this all together. The truth is, folks, you want to hear from Lonnie Cameron, who's going to do the most of the talking on behalf of Boston Tree, but I'll try to give you a good overview and set her up. She's the one who designed our program to address this problem, and it's the smartest person you're going to find in New England on it. So she may not want me to blow so much sunshine in her direction, but it is deserved. So Just briefly, a little bit about Boston Tree so you can understand how our beech leaf disease program makes sense for us as a company. For over 47 years, we've been an all organic company, and probably the first ones in the Boston area to take that approach. There's an interesting backstory, but the time is not now to go into it on how we became an all organic company. But we've been doing it longer than most other companies out there by a long shot. The reason we do it is it works better. It really started off on trying to avoid harmful pesticides and chemicals, as we've all gotten smarter over the years about these things. Takes time, but we've also realized it works better. And let me put it to you this way: you've never seen someone dragging a bag of Scott's fertilizer out into a forest to fertilize trees, have you? It just doesn't happen. So, as much as we sometimes look at the trees in our suburban landscape and wonder why they're not healthy. To be honest, from the way we look at it, is when they're healthy, we wonder why they're healthy. It's not the natural habitat to be between three fences, a sidewalk, and a road with a house in the middle. So trees don't grow in a prairie, and grass doesn't grow in a forest. But for some reason, we all want to have both of these put together in our suburban landscapes. And the thing we try to do here at Boston Tree is to help people manage that compromise. There's really very few trees in Melrose outside of the town forest that are in its natural habitat. And that has consequences. Fish belong in the oceans, the ponds, and lakes. When we stick them in a fishbowl, we know that we've got to do things to make sure that fish stays alive. And that's how, at least for the purpose of this conversation, I'd like you to think about the trees in your yard. So if the fishbowl is dirty, we all know that you're supposed to clean the fishbowl. You don't drug the fish. And that same idea is the philosophy behind Boston Tree Preservation. Organic is not incredibly complicated, but it's not straightforward after decades of going down to Home Depot or Lowe's and using synthetics and pesticides. So to move things forward a little bit here, what I'd like to lay out here is whenever you do business with Boston Tree Preservation, it's going to be an organic approach. It's kind of like going into Whole Foods. You're just not going to find a ton of processed food in there. So the beech leaf disease program, when we developed it, we were trying to take a different approach than everybody else. A lot of guys are trying to directly deal with the problem of the nematode. And we do that as well, but we really lean on our strength, which is the holistic care of the tree. As James very well laid out, you've seen the visual indications of the problem with the microorganism, a nematode, theoretically originated from Japan, and it attacks the leaves and destroys the tree's ability to move energy up and down. Lonnie will go into a little bit greater detail, but the key point I want to get across to you here is it is a matter of when, not if, your tree is exposed to this nematode. Most likely there's a small bird, may even be the state bird of New Hampshire, that helps, among other ways, to move this nematode around. You could see it in a microscope, like in the upper left-hand corner, we have a little picture of it. And that little sucker surfs on water. That's how they move around, because they don't have legs. And they'll move up and down the branches, through the leaves, into the buds. But moving down to the second bullet, the great news is that they don't move internally through the tree. They're not going to go, one little nematode is not going to surf inside the tree like the Aliens movie and come out the other side of the tree. And that provides us with some opportunities for our approach to work. So our approach is not a direct cure to eliminate the nematode. That is going to take some other specialists, a few years of research and development, who are highly motivated because it's very profitable if they can solve this problem. Our solution is to take a tree that would live 5 to 7 years once infected, and then to have a holistic care program for that tree that pushes life expectancy out into the double digits, 12, 14, 15 years, well beyond the time it's going to take for enterprising entrepreneurs to bring a solution to market and make a lot of money, in which case we will buy it from them and come help you solve this problem with your trees. So again, I already addressed kind of the strategy. We look at every single aspect of the tree's biological processes and try to support them all. And the simple analogy here is all of us have had a period in our lives where we're pretty healthy, and we maybe got exposed to the common cold. We got the snuffles. We might have coughed once or sneezed, and that was it. We were healthy again a day later. And then we probably all had days when we've been a little run down. Maybe we weren't taking as good a care of ourselves. We catch a cold and we're in bed for 3 days. So our philosophy is to make sure that your tree is pumping iron, doing squats, and running 10K every day. So when it does get sick, it can fight off the effects of the nematode and have a life expectancy that's measured in the double digits, not the singles. All the credit on the last bullet goes to Lonnie, and I don't want to steal her thunder, so I'm going to turn it over to her quick. But I'll tell you this, because she may not highlight it herself. She's got a 96%. That's an A+ rating on about just shy of 50 trees that she's been treating for over a year. We're going to give you a strong sample of that. Truth in advertising. We got one tree that isn't really getting any better nor getting worse, and then we've got one tree that's going downhill. And we'll spend the next 2 months trying to figure out why that is and see if we can turn that situation around. But we like our batting average. We still have a lot more to learn, but we think we're onto something. And we're coming at this from a wholly different perspective than anybody else. With that, I'm going to turn to be the mouse jockey for Lonnie. And I'm going to turn this thing over to her. All yours, Lonnie.
Okay, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having us. It's a pleasure to be speaking to all of you today. My name's Lonnie Cameron. I have been working at Boston Tree since 2005. In that time period, we have seen a huge number of invasive insects move through different tree species around here. So it is something that we're very used to and capable of dealing with. The nematode is posing some interesting problems for us, primarily because it's microscopic. So typically when we have an insect move in, there are visual signs and indicators of an infestation starting that we can see, so we know more easily how to monitor the spread and gauge the life cycle and all that sort of thing. Like with the winter moth caterpillar that I'm sure you're familiar with from a number of years ago. If you saw the moths around your door in the lights around Thanksgiving, you had a really good indication of how high of a level of infestation you were going to have in the spring. Now, the nematode is microscopic, and so it's giving scientists a bit of difficulty nailing down how it's spread, the life cycle of the pest, and therefore how to go about treating it. People are doing nematode extractions from leaves and buds, and they're coming up with varying results in terms of when the nematode is in the leaf, when it's in the bud. Sometimes you expect it to be there because you're seeing visual symptoms, and they're finding that they don't see any of the nematodes actually in the leaf. So what we know at this point in time is that at some point during the later part of the growing season, the nematode, who has been existing inside of the leaf tissue for the whole season, migrates out of the leaf and down the twigs into next year's bud. Now, once it gets into the bud, it spends the winter overwintering in the plant, damaging the tissue so that in the springtime, the leaves push out infected. A good example of this, I don't know if anybody has noticed, but if you drove up 95 towards Gloucester at all this summer, you might have noticed that there are large patches of what appear to be dead trees on the side of the road the whole way up. I didn't even realize those were beech trees because prior to this spring, you were seeing no symptoms and they just blended into the rest of the canopy. So obviously this year in our area, the disease pressure has climbed dramatically. And so owing to the fact that it's difficult to, at this point in time, pinpoint the life cycle and therefore come up with an exact treatment window based on, migration patterns, growing degree days, that sort of thing that we typically use when gaining control of an insect, we've had to step back and say, okay, how can we mitigate this problem since we don't have the exact right tool to kill this pest? And so what we've done is our goal overall the whole time at Boston Tree is always to look at the tree in its environment and support the whole thing, starting from the soil. We know that if we have healthy soil and we have our soil food web functioning properly, that's going to support the whole immune system of the tree. And we can essentially have a little micro forest ecosystem in somebody's front yard, with applications that we do ranging from soil foods to compost tea applications and that sort of thing. So we've just expanded our philosophy. And instead of saying, let's target this pest and try to kill this pest, let's help the whole tree become healthier, because we know that plants are very good at warding off attacks from pests. So if we move to the first slide here, we'll see an example. This is a tree that we just started treating last year. So if you look at the August slide, that was actually the initial intake appointment of the tree that we did. So we documented the whole thing. We did soil sampling, looked for compaction layers, and began treatment of the tree. And we can see that in just 1 year, it visually appears that we've stopped the decline of this tree. Now, it's interesting with this one in particular, because when they called us, they let us know that this was actually the 3rd year that they had been seeing symptoms. And the other interesting thing to point out is right behind that wall, behind the tree, is 95. And we're right on the corner of Route 1 and 95 here. So we know that this tree was suffering visually to the point where the people who take care of the tree noticed it for 3 years prior to calling us to start treating the tree. And it's also smack dab in the middle of the corridor where disease pressure has magnified extremely this year. So that was very pleasing to see that we're having a really good response with our treatment protocol. One of the things that I've noticed on the majority of the trees where the health is improved is that we're seeing trees that were where last year, the year before, the last number of years, you were having about 1 inch, maybe 2 inches of new growth on the twigs. This year, with the soil foods, compost tea, nematode treatments that we've been doing, we're averaging about 8 or 9 inches of new growth consistently throughout the whole canopy of the tree. Now, if you look on the right-hand picture down the lower section of the tree, we can see that we still have evidence of nematode activity. The leaves are smaller, they're thin. If you look at them up close, you're still seeing the banding, the intervanal banding from the nematode, but overall, the tree has been able, with our help, to not continue to go into a decline. And then we can move on to the next slide. This is a tree that we've been treating for a number of years. Last year was the first year. July, you can see the first year that we saw any evidence of nematode activity. Prior to this, we had been feeding this tree on a yearly basis, which is pretty standard for some of our larger trees that in the past, like the beech trees, have had no real health concerns. And then that level of care obviously did not stop the nematode from attacking this tree, but increased ministrations reversed the symptoms that we were seeing last year and allowed the tree to put out a much fuller, denser canopy this year. You can see to the left-hand side of the tree that side is a little thinner in both photos. What you don't see is at the bottom of that one left leader, there is a very large wound on the trunk of the tree. Now, this leads back to what James was saying with the images that he showed about bark missing on trees. One of our main struggles with urban trees is that they are not just subjected to one stress point, they have multiple ones. So we have a codominant leader here that has a lot of included bark. So the left-hand leader was weaker to begin with, owing to the wound on the bottom, and the other leader pressing up against it, which means its vascular system is not functioning optimally. So it is possible that that leader will continue to decline over the course of the next number of years. However, the overall tree is responding very nicely. One of the really nice things about beech trees, and you'll see if we look at the next slide, is the great denseness of the canopy. When you stand under a beech tree and it's healthy, you know it's healthy because you're seeing virtually no sky up through. There's no sunlight coming down through. And then on the left here, we can see last year was the first year we noticed infestation on this tree, and dramatic how prevalent it was and how much sky is actually exposed. Now, if you have a tree that has a really dense canopy where you don't necessarily have a lot of sunlight reaching down to the soil, your soil temperature is cooler, you have better moisture retention, and you can imagine the stress when we have a defoliation situation where all of a sudden now that soil and that whole root system has become exposed to the sun that it has not adapted to dealing with. So we're dealing with multiple stress factors. We have construction damage that we deal with. You can see this tree has limited space for its root system, being pressed right up against the foundation of the house. The street is probably about 15 feet away from the trunk of this tree. So it is essentially living in a pot. And that's how all of our trees really are. And so the focus is to get the soil to be as active as possible so that the plant can get all of its resources from the small amount of space that is allocated to it. And we can move on to the next slide. Is another shot of the same tree. Again, this one makes it even more apparent, the change in canopy that we see from an infected tree to this one didn't have as much visual indications of nematode damage. We weren't seeing as many instances of leaves being banded, but what happens is that owing to the nematode being in the bud over winter, the buds aren't able to push out as well. So they're still damaged. And so we can see the results of treatment on this tree with the increase in density of the canopy. Now, our next tree that we'll see here on the next slide, this actually is a Melrose tree. And this guy lives on a corner lot, so very limited soil space. You can see we're looking at the beech tree on the right-hand side that's circled, but you can see that we lost a maple years and years and years ago, owing to location being right on the street edge. Stressful situation. So to go from seeing this, one of my favorite trees, looking so poorly last June, and then to see it yesterday and having a comparison side by side is really thrilling, quite honestly. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to Dawn. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as well. This is, again, another different angle of that same Melrose tree that we've been treating.
All right, thanks, Lonnie. For everyone in the audience, I think it's apparent when you listen to Lonnie talk about the trees. I can tell you from my long conversations with her, she was holding back. So, she probably could have dumped about 10 times as much information into you. But hopefully this gives you a solid overview of the approach. It was about, in general, we were doing about 6 to 8 visits per year per tree. Originally, we envisioned 6 visits per year for an uninfected tree to get it strong. And then if it was infected, about 8. The majority of the trees that we're treating are infected, the overwhelming majority. And what I did for the customers is we said, hey, at this point, it's fairly expensive treatment because it's the difference between a visit to the regular doctor and being in the ICU. And it's a heavy treatment. People committed a fair amount of money, but we've gone out on a couple occasions and done a 9th or a 10th treatment on the trees. Never came back to the customers for additional money because we were selling a result, not just a series of applications. And although we've been very successful in the first year of the program, due to Lonnie's hard work, 12 months ago, we realized we may have had to adapt and pivot to see what was going to work. So we would go the extra mile for all of our customers because we understand these trees are a lot of times it's the reason they bought their house. And apologize, I realized I had my video off. This is the reason a lot of people bought their homes, and it's a marquee tree on their property. A real estate agent would value these trees in the 5 figures. Another tree company who, unlike us, would cut wood. We don't cut grass. And we don't cut wood here. We kind of feel that if we made money cutting your tree down, it's a little bit like that Far Side cartoon where you have Murphy's veterinary clinic immediately next to Murphy's taxidermy shop. Figured to be a little bit of a contradiction of interest. So we just do one thing, and we don't make money when your trees die. This program here that we have is pretty heavy duty, but the worst thing you're going to get out of it is you're going to have the healthiest tree in your neighborhood. We are kind of focused on the 2 trees out of the sub 50 that did great, and we're going to try to figure out how we can get those to be a little bit better. But I want to leave time for Q&A, and I know you really want to ask Lonnie those questions, less so me. But what I did is I put a slide here together, and I just wanted to let you know a couple things. One, way at the bottom is the link to the specific page on our website that talks about our beech leaf disease program. The way we start folks off is they purchase the first assessment, which comes with the first treatment. And Lonnie, particularly because you're in Melrose, it would definitely be Lonnie, comes out, spends a serious amount of time in taking that tree, pulling a lot of data on it to make sure that it matches the plan that we have laid out for it. And so no matter what time of year it is, you're going to get the treatment that is appropriate to that month whenever you start the program. The program is 12 months. It's 12 months. It's right now 8 treatments. Once a price has been committed to, I would only add treatments, never take treatments away. And frankly, we're a business, and we like that 96% success rate, and I want to maintain it. And if I come out a 9th, 10th, or 11th time to make sure your tree is doing well, and you speak well about us to your neighbors, that is more than worth it for me. Now, right now, James got quite a number of people together, and we were hoping to perhaps bounce some ideas off of another tree company here. But the opportunity to speak to you and tell you about what we do is valuable to us, and we wanted to show our appreciation for it in 2 ways, one to you and one to James. For anybody here on the webinar tonight, and we got basically the last names of the people involved, there's a promo code put up on that slide that I'm sure James can pass out on a distribution list in case it's hard to jot it down based on the size of the screen you're looking at.
Yeah, I will. I'll send, if it's okay with you, Don,
Yeah.
I'll send this whole PDF out to everybody that's both on and was on our mailing list.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Thanks.
And that'll give you a 25% off the first treatment, which is exactly the purchase option you see on our website. Any money we get when you purchase the initial treatment, Lonnie's going to come out, check out the tree, tell you what it's going to cost to treat it for a year. Right now, we've been basing the price on the diameter at breast height of the tree. It's not cheap, and so we've been pretty precise. If one person's tree is 1 inch bigger than another person's tree, then their price is adjusted based on 1 inch. So don't worry, if you're a small medium, we're not rounding up on you. And it's calculated out pretty precisely. if you decide not to treat the tree, you will have at least got the first treatment, whatever the appropriate treatment is for that month, and a soil test and an assessment of where your tree is at. But the people who are on the program, it's like subscribing to Time Magazine for 1 year. We take the price and it's broken up into 12 payments. And you can work with our back office on, some people prefer to pay up front and just not worry about it. Other people pay every month. But we'll be back to check on your tree. And hopefully what you get is when we do this again with James next year, it's your tree up here. And you have a nice photo there on the right. Just in case anyone was wondering, I promise you I didn't get the photos reversed in the presentation. It is definitely the before on the left and the after on the right. As I mentioned to James, I appreciate him putting the work to get everybody together here. The Melrose Tree Project is going to get 10% of any revenues I get from the people in this audience after that 12 months is closed. James and I will keep a track of who it was, and we'll track the invoices. And when 12 months has gone by, cut James a check for 10% of those sales and help that Melrose Tree Project out. Spent a lot of time in Melrose as a kid, born and raised in Reading, but all my orthodontists and dentists were there. So I always remember driving through your lovely town, either terrified of what was about to happen or numb on the way home. But I have a good number of friends in the town, and it is a beautiful set of trees. And I'll tell you, you guys are lucky to have somebody like James. But you don't want to listen to me talk anymore. If you have some questions for Lonnie, this would probably be the good time to say, hey, what about my tree?
I have a couple of general questions, not specific to a particular tree.
Fire away.
Okay, so with respect to your the treatment that you provide, I'm curious. You of course have been doing this for years. You've been supporting trees with these I guess they're injections or whatever treatment you're using. So my question is the nematode treatment significantly different in the kind of components that go into the solution you use, or is it sort of like a simply more applications of the same kind of stuff?
It's a higher level of intensity. So what we're trying to do is primarily most of our efforts are liquid soil applications to the root zone, as much of it as we can reach of the tree as possible. Now, we do have a couple of aspects of the program that specifically are targeting the nematode, but we have used these treatments for other pest problems in the past.
Okay, thank you.
In the simplest analogy, I think Lonnie said it as well as it can be said, is I use the analogy of an intensive care unit. It is both the volume, as Lonnie said, and somewhat the urgency. With a normal situation, people come to see us when their trees are not looking great, but they definitely could be better. And we do get what we call some 911 scenarios, but of course in tree time, it's somewhat a play on words. There is no real 911. In this case, though, time is pretty significant. So we're trying to fight the next cycle of energy production for the tree. And we're trying to make sure that that is at least a holding or positive cycle as opposed to another negative cycle. The one thing we're collecting data on is, where is the tipping point, right? I mentioned that one that didn't improve and the other one that's declining. So that's a big investigative area for us. It could be a lot of the structural, environmental / sort of tree in a teapot things that Lonnie talked about. It also could have been it hits a critical state of decline, and you can't bring it back. But you're pretty much straight at it. We're not pulling out a tool on these beech trees that we don't pull out in some other scenario, but it is the number of things that we do, and as Lonnie said, the intensity of it. And simply, it's the ICU analogy being applied.
Thank you. If nobody else has a question, I have one more.
Please.
And this is just very general. We're waiting for the cure, right, for the nematode, and sort of maintaining the health of trees in the ICU until it can come along. Can you talk a little more about timing for that? Who's doing it? What it looks like? Any more specific information on actually killing the nematode?
I'll let Lonnie finish up, but just to prep it, I don't always use this analogy when I'm explaining things to people, but we all remember the famous basketball player Magic Johnson, perhaps when we were growing up, and he got sick years ago, and he had HIV, but because he was very famous and very rich, he had the money and the offers from many excellent doctors to try to keep him healthy. And he may still carry HIV, but he never developed AIDS. And that was because there was something of a kitchen sink or ICU approach thrown at him. Our approach is similar. And the problem we ran into last year when I asked Lonnie to develop this program is that the life expectancy of infected trees was really not much further than when we thought we were going to first see an approved drug or treatment or injection on the market. I'm not entirely sure, but it may or may not be prudent for us to mention the names of companies who are developing this stuff, because we do collaborate with them, and it will be their trade secret when they do finally produce it, perhaps even patented. But I can tell you that we don't have to drive far to go see them. So. There are the usual suspects in this industry, and I can tell you that there is a lot of money to be made in solving this problem. What makes Lonnie's feedback to them so valuable, and I'll zip it so she can tell you what she thinks, is her field feedback. They have a lab setting, they have a controlled outdoor field environment, but so to speak, I sometimes think of Lonnie as the Jane Goodall of trees, and she is out there seeing what's really going on all the time. And because she's up close and personal and seeing what's going on, she has more real-time feedback. But with that perhaps unwanted pat on the back there, I'll turn it over to Lonnie.
Right. So we are working with a company who is experimenting with different products that would be targeted as pesticides to kill the nematode. So what we know about nematodes is they're very delicate. We use nematodes for our turf grub applications, and we need to store them in the refrigerator. We need to apply them when the air temperature and the soil temperature are exactly right. We need to apply them on an overcast or preferably rainy day. They are very, very delicate creatures. So the only thing we're really waiting on in terms of finding a way to get rid of the nematode or attack it is having the life cycle nailed down for us. And the reason that's difficult is because they're microscopic. So the amount of effort I think that it would take for somebody to be doing maybe even daily nematode extraction samplings of foliage and buds on multiple trees in a large area throughout the course of an entire year to be able to have a wide enough study group to nail down that life cycle, whereas typically with a pest like this, we can visually see it, So that's the really difficult part. Ideally, with any sort of treatment, we would be targeting the nematode between when it moves out of the damaged foliage from this year into the bud that's being set prior to it being able to do damage over the winter. So we have the option of doing sprays on the foliage to intercept the migration of the nematode. And the other option would be to be doing a systemic injection. But the problem is the vascular system of the tree. Most of the titration goes to the foliage. There's not a lot of movement that's going to a bud because it's so small and so tight. Because it's not respirating. So ideally, you want the product to migrate into the bud as the bud is starting to elongate in the fall, prior to the nematode being able to take up residence and do a lot of damage. So there's layers of complications to it.
Right. Okay.
But on the other hand, every pest is different, and how they act in our environment is different. So we have the hemlock woolly adelgid. It's been here for about 35 years. It's going nowhere. We had the winter moth caterpillar. It was here for 17 years or so, and then it just moved off on its own. You know, magnolia scale shows up for a couple of years and then it disappears, and then it comes back and then it disappears. So all pests are different, and we don't even know, because this is brand new, we don't know what its reaction to this environment is going to be either.
And just to piggyback on what Lonnie was saying, you know, there are some very, very, very young beech trees that, you know, ones that you can wrap your hands around, like around the trunk, and we'll get calls and people want us to treat them, but we'll usually advise the person that the cost of the program may not be worth it because, well, two things. One, the replacement value of the tree is not yet that high. It is a very young tree. You could put another sapling in. The problem, however, is that young beech trees are more susceptible to this. They have shorter lifespans. The big, large, mature ones, in fact, a lot of the ones that we're treating, and the reason they're doing better is they're just bigger. There's more mass there. If the nematode, so to speak, is taking down the bricks of the castle, and the castle is the energy transport system, one brick at a time, they just have a lot of bricks to take down before they're going to kill the tree. But that is one of the main reasons we try to emphasize it is a matter of when, not if. Because if, as Lonnie showed you in one of the last photos, there was a maple tree that didn't make it. Maybe it was planted in the wrong place. But of course, you know, that homeowner, if it was one of you, could go out and purchase another maple tree sapling, put it in the right place, take care of it, it'll grow to be a beautiful, mature tree. Well, right now we can't do that with the beech trees because the young ones are unlikely to make it to maturity if they get infected, because it's very hard to treat them when they're very, very small. So what we're trying to do, the whole goal here, is to preserve the stock of beech trees around here while we learn how to be more precise with our treatment. But to preserve it until a solution exists so it becomes safe to replace the ones that were lost with new ones. But right now, if a beech tree was taken out and someone said, should I plant another beech tree? We would have to tell them about, you know, the likelihood that that young sapling would be infected and just die. It'd be too small to treat. So I think that's what makes this situation perhaps different than other infections, is that right now, when these trees are lost, they're going to be lost for a while. We just can't plant another one and wait 40, 50 years.
Are there any more questions out there?
I would just like to thank you all for the presentation.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Yep. And so we will save this. It'll be available. The presentation will be available on the website. I'll mail around a copy of this to everybody so that you'll all have this. And, you know, the whole goal of the Melrose Tree Project is to bring awareness to our tree stock. We leave it to you as homeowners and tree owners to decide what you think is right and what you can invest in. But we really think that the beeches of Melrose are like a cornerstone for our community, and just hoping to raise awareness and that we all take care of them. So thank you so much for everything, Don. And Melanie, thank you so much for presenting tonight.
Thanks,
So
guys.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.